Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant. My name is Niels Tudor Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. This episode is part of the Brussels office category. Throughout Europe, and especially in the Brussels ecosystem, there are thousands of small offices and teams trying to juggle with few resources, approaching funding and implementing projects. This podcast, The Grant, tries to shed light on these heroes now and then. In this episode, I have Chiara Liguori in the virtual podcast studio to share about her experience under such conditions for a small organization in Brussels in one of her previous roles. We dig into the framework conditions to operate within, and then she opens up about how proposal writing and project management functions in this context. And here it is all man on board, the small team of employees, interns, and not least volunteers. Excellent content for many of you out there working under the same conditions. Please enjoy. The Grant. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Today, we're going to have a look at the conditions that many of you out there, you have the frame that you are operating within at your work. Small organizations and proposal writing. There are lots of you out there. I'm going to focus on the Erasmus proposal writing, and Chiara, welcome.
Thank you.
And this is the reason why we record now. That's because you joined us for the first meetup I had back in June on Place de Luxembourg, and that was very nice and cozy. So thanks for that. That was great. And I discussed with several of the participants there if they would like to join as guests, and you you accepted that invitation. So welcome in. Before I say anything else, could you please shortly introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you for having me. My name is Chiara. I originally come from Italy, but I've been for the past 4 or 5 years in Belgium, in Brussels, where I've mainly worked on EU funding, and specifically my career started with Erasmus Plus funding. So I hope to contribute a bit to the discussion as well. And right now I'm instead focusing on Horizon projects on innovation and research.
Yeah, it's you are one of these thousands of individuals and professionals in Brussels that you go to Brussels in an early age, and then you step into that ecosystem and try to build up a career. And it seems like now at least you move position since we met in the summer. So apparently it looks like you're doing well. So congratulations with that. But you have many professional sort of colleagues, so to say, or peers out there that do exactly the same work as you do in Brussels, but also throughout Europe. And that's what we're going to try to zoom in on here. I always have a short fly-in. Can you just in 2 lines give a glimpse into this thing, writing proposals in small organizations?
Yeah. Well, as you said, there's many people like me working in youth organizations in Brussels as well, and I have the impression that many of us run into the same issues with Erasmus Plus projects. It usually starts with the proposal writing. That's also something we're going to discuss today, because sometimes the forms are too long or the language is too technical. And when you have a very small team, there's 1 or 2 people trying to handle everything. So from writing to budgeting and making it all fit to your priorities, it can be sometimes overwhelming. And then when the project finally gets approved, that's when the real challenge begins, because you're now managing much more. Often with no dedicated person in the team, just someone juggling everything. The passion is there. I would say the good ideas are there as well, but the capacity is not.
Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect bridge to the first block we have here. So just to motivate this for the listeners of what we're going to cover today, for everybody out there that sits in knots. So we're going to try to cover the things that you sit with every single day: the capacity, how to deal with proposals and the projects when they're funded, and then the human impact, the impact that it has on you as an individual to work in this kind of environment. So let's kick it off with the capacity challenge, Chiara. Um, knowing Brussels, I've been working in Brussels for 8 years. I've been connected to the environment for many more years than that, and I know exactly what this. You have offices sometimes with 2-3 people. I've been sitting in larger offices, but I actually also try to be a one-man band there. So, can you open this up a little bit?
Yeah, I'll try to unpack this capacity challenge a bit. In my opinion, it's been one of the toughest challenges, as I was also saying in the fly-in. And I've experienced it myself, as I was coming from a team of 2 full-time people, with sometimes an intern joining us and a board of volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's great to, although we have some organizations have a small team, it's great to also have a board of volunteers to rely on. But I think that some programs like the Erasmus Plus assume a level of internal capacity that many youth NGOs, like the one I come from, just don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we say capacity in the context of Erasmus Plus, project management or other funding as well, capacity means not only having enough people, but also enough trained people, enough time, the right tools to write, plan, implement, or report on projects. And of course, let's say that on the financial side, in Erasmus Plus projects, we have lump sums, which make it easier, especially when it's about beneficiary grants or support to youth organizations. But overall, there's much that one person should be able to cover. And I believe that for small organizations, and especially those that are new to the program, it can be a steep learning curve. And when you have no prior experience, then it's easy to underestimate what running a new project actually demands on a day-to-day.
Yeah, because it's a paradox, right? Because you have this funding scheme that wants to fund these kind of organizations, but the way it is structured, the way that you are accessing it, is too big a challenge for the kind of organizations that need the money that the funding scheme is meant for. It's a little bit like the SME program and the EIC program. It's and we can walk around this a lot. I also this podcast is now an old podcast, and I've been there before, right? But as a small organization, you need to somehow get around this, yeah. And this volunteer thing, or very cheap, like interns or that is like putting a very little plaster on an open broken leg, right? Because it's they don't have any, they don't understand how to deal with this. And then even if they're quick learners, they cannot live out of nothing. They themselves are there to have a career in Brussels, right? So it's not. It's very. It's constantly running with the devil behind you, to try to catch the money, so you can breathe a little bit when you have the project. And we'll come back to later what happens when the project is funded. Yeah. So this capacity thing, and it's not something that you can just solve. Well, the way to solve it is that it would be easier to access the money. But then, how, before we move into talking about proposals and projects, how did you experience these elements, the volunteer, did you have volunteers in your organization? The way you worked
Yes,
with this?
we did with it. And being, let's say, the place where I was working before also had a political aspect to it. Well, it was a political organization.
Mm-hmm.
So we also had a board of volunteers we were working with on a daily basis. And these volunteers are usually elected on a 2-year term, which can also be renewed. And when we talk about Erasmus Plus grants or other types of funding schemes, that's of course ideal when these people get re-elected, because at least you can ensure that there is continuity for the organization, not just when it comes to people working in the secretariat, but also on the volunteer side. So I think that turnover is, of course, very good and healthy for all kinds of organizations in general. But in this case, indeed, this turnover can also create inconsistencies, because priorities are also likely to shift. And the new board, the new team of volunteers might not have the same buy-in as the former ones who started the work on a grant, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, well, here I'm mentioning, for example, when one works in the context of a framework partnership agreements, you start with a specific team of volunteers around you, but then when you progress in this framework, things might change, priorities might shift, people might change as well.
Are they paid anything, these volunteers? Or is it pure volunteer, don't get anything? How's that?
Well, where I was working, no, it was pure volunteering. Yes.
Yeah, but see, you can't count on that, right? It's not very sustainable. You can't really. That's not very sustainable, right, for an organization, especially for because they will leave the second they have the possibility to get a paid job.
Let's say, still on my point of view and what I have experienced, that was not the case, because it was always people who had their own job, and then they were volunteering on the side because they were motivated, because they had passion, and they wanted to be engaged in the organization in such a role.
How many hours per week were they per month did the volunteers work?
I don't really know, because it also depends on the type of work you're doing. So in this board of volunteers, everyone had a specific set of tasks. So also, let's say, depending on the time of the year, on the priorities, or on different events, then one had to work more than another. But I would not know how to quantify exactly their work, their hours of work for the organization.
But it's they're good if people they feel like making an extra effort and doing something, but when you run a professional organization, and then everybody would like to have FTI, right? Yeah, full time, staff that you pay and that you can develop also, and so on.
Hello, my name is Denitsa. I'm from Science Business, and we always listen to the grant, so it's coming up, and please tune in. Is that okay?
Let's move into the proposals.
Mm-hmm.
To the next block, and talk a little bit about how you manage this. Now, any funding scheme in the EU is fairly complex to approach. And so is the Erasmus. It's not something you just do. Can you open a little bit up about how you worked with it?
Yeah, of course. I think that's one of the main barriers that NGOs can face in Erasmus Plus. It's like starting from the proposal writing stage is indeed the application, because you have these long templates, and if you have no prior experience in EU funding, then it's really easy to get lost in the terminology and in the length of the application form.
It's horrible.
And it's true that the European Commission organizes these info sessions that people can attend before applying. It's true that they have also documentation on how to understand better some parts of the application, but it's also true that sometimes the same documents can raise more questions than they answer.
Mhm.
And in my own experience, when I started working in this organization, I was hired as an intern, and I was mainly working on I was a policy and training intern. So as the title says, I was mainly on the policy, resolutions of the organizations, as well as training. So maybe some communication tasks and event management tasks for the activities that we were implementing as part of the Erasmus projects we had in line.
Yeah.
So let's say I was slowly introduced to project management until I started covering that role. And I was mainly introduced to that by starting with proposal writing. I remember in the very beginning, the former Secretary General of the organization was drafting the application, and he would ask me, or as well other volunteers in the board, to complete some of the sections that were, of course, more relevant to our day-to-day work. And I remember he let me contribute to a couple of sessions, mainly on communication, on events, because indeed I had a better overview. But I remember that in the very beginning, as I was very new to these templates and proposal writing in general, I had to Google half of the terms, because it was the very first time I saw a Power B template of a grant application. And of course, I took some courses, I took some training, and with some experience as well, it became easier with time. But I clearly remember that in the beginning, it was not even clear for me what was the difference between communication dissemination, to name one.
No, because yeah, it's a whole. I always call it. It's a parallel world. It's a parallel universe to the real world, and the whole lingo, the layers, complexity of how to approach the for instance, not just the proposal, but everything that is surrounding the proposal of capacities you need to have as a person, of interhuman capacities and skills, organizational skills, and so it's not just the ability to write something out. It's very difficult, and I believe it took me years also when I entered this area in 2008 to understand. There's still corners of it where I said, "What bloody hell's this?" Yeah, but it's and that's of course when you sit in a small organization. But so it's like this. How many people were you in the office?
We were two. Sometimes we had an intern joining.
Yeah. So you have the Secretary General, then one person, aka you, and then one coming here. Then anyway, so you have the Secretary General. They have tons of other things to do than writing a proposal, right? Still, that person's doing that, and then you need to take some of that load without a concept understanding of what it actually is that is being thrown at you, because you can read English. But to understand what is being written, I hear the words, but I don't understand what you say. Yeah. So what? So what? So you took. So you taught yourself. So to say, you took courses. You Googled things. Now people can listen to the grant. But it's actually one of the reasons why I made the timeline series. This is where I started when I started recording the podcast. That let's break every single section of phase of writing a proposal. Let's break that down in a full episode to people to help. This is actually what I did. So what steps? What did you do? Obviously, you did your job and added your contribution.
Well, in the beginning, indeed, as I said, I was just contributing to some parts of the grant. That's mainly when I started working there. And I knew that at some point of the year, this grant would come, and we would be requested to contribute with our input. And then slowly, I started taking more and more responsibility, and then at some point it was me drafting the full application. But indeed, it took some time. It took guidance also by the Secretary General, especially because, of course, well, even when you work in team, and even when you draft this type of applications with other people, I have the feeling that it's always one person who knows and follows the concept completely, fully, from the beginning to the end, and knows what they have put in the application in and out.
Unless they are organizations that have been working together for a long time, also in other projects on similar issues, where they always go together, where they are totally in sync. What we're doing here, yes. It is. There's one key motivated part, often the proposal writer and coordinator, and then you have key partners from the network that you attach, that you normally always, but their motivation is, of course, to have the money. Because many of these organizations, especially in Erasmus, they have the same problem as that little organization that you work for, resources. And then we shape it around this, but it's true that the content often is lying on the shoulders of the coordinator, the proposal owner. So what did the Secretary General have time for you? Could you brainstorm, or was that person too busy, or how was that?
No, I really received a lot of guidance from him, and also if I reached a level where I became completely autonomous on this type of application, it's also thanks to him. Then, as I said, I took some training on my own because I started being really passionate about that, and I wanted to really learn how to make things, how to write applications properly. But indeed, he had enough time for sure, next to writing application and coordinating many more things in the organization, to help me in drafting that, and emphasizing that it was always a teamwork where everyone could make their own contribution. And also always brainstorming as well. For example, while drafting work packages, I remember there was a lot of brainstorming around events we wanted to implement as part of an FPA or a grant agreement.
Yeah, and I guess it depends very much which group you come into. When I started, was a newbie in writing proposals, I got a little bit of. I was working together with universities that had done this a lot. So the text that I got was something that could be worked with. Some of the text, but at least there I sort of, and then I was working for a large grant consultancy organization where I could see former proposals. We could share how things had been done before, which was a huge help. So that was actually something I spent a lot of time on when I started each section, that I could go into another proposal and say, okay, this looks like this and this and this and this.
No, indeed. Maybe just to link to what you said, it is true that it was very, very helpful also to see how previous grants were written, in order to know more or less how you had to fill the sections of the coming ones. So that was a great help. But when it comes to partners, they were really, really useful during the implementation of the grant after it was approved. But when it comes to the proposal writing, it's something that we were really doing internally, just the secretariat with the volunteers. But it was not a stage where we were involving the partners. So that's what I mean by
It's also different from proposal to proposal. Some proposals, the lead, the proposal owner prefers to be the main course and then take feedback in when needed from the partners. Other consortia, they prefer to have a sort of writing group with contributions from a core group, not everybody. So before we move into talking about the project implementation, now we have here in the rundown. Did you get it the hard way? Late nights?
Yes, it did happen.
You
I
have
won't lie.
anxiety?
It has happened as well. Yes. Yeah.
Was any of your KPIs, were they connected to the proposal you do? Was it expected a certain score, or was it your salary or whatever? Was your position in the organization reliant on you winning that grant?
No, I wouldn't say my position was
Okay.
relying on that.
Because that's the reality for many people out there.
Thanks to that, I grew thanks to the experience in this type of tasks. So my position benefited from writing this, but not in terms of salary, in terms of experience.
Because that is the reality for many out there within this area, but also within Horizon. It is especially SME startups and so on in the technology corner, and in this corner Erasmus, for these kind of NGOs, small organizations. Often, if they don't win the funding, then they have to lay people off because there's no money, so that's good. So at least you didn't have that.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
But yeah, the late nights, nobody can write a proposal without sitting until late at night. It's not possible. Do you have any?
Maybe as we're talking about small organizations, I think that's the reality for many.
Yeah. And it's not like the manager, the secretary general, which is often the title, director. It's often secretary general, no matter how small the office is. Sometimes it's a little there's a mismatch between the size of the organization and type of title. They also work their ass off.
Yes.
It's not because they sit with their feet up, they themselves have a huge responsibility because they often, that's a different podcast episode, but they often sit and has to deal with a board or members, a general assembly, the overall responsibility for budget, for tax returns to the Belgian state, for all of these things, invoicing, simple things like paying rent, whatever, all this. So it's not like it's one sitting with a cigar and a big hat, and then the rest work. Like it's really working like crazy, everybody.
Yes, definitely. It's really a lot of work, and finding the time to also contribute and being the leader many times on this type of grants is admirable.
Now let's move into the when it's funded, because oh the joy and oh the horror, because then comes the money, and that's fantastic. But what it does is that then you need to do what you promised in that proposal naturally. So tell me, balancing project delivery with administrative compliance.
I believe it's something that sometimes can be underestimated. Still talking about project delivery this time, not after the grant writing stage, let's say.
You won the money now, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. But it's important to remember that this side of project delivery and administrative compliance don't sit in separate offices. As you were saying, the person who is, let's say, running a workshop in the morning as part of the grant, that was indeed successful, is the same person that's uploading evidence about it in the afternoon. So the challenge is, as we were saying, the capacity in terms of time that these organizations have at disposal. And in this framework, what I've seen that works best is treating compliance like a habit, rather than something that you really have to do when the activity has ended or when the full project ends. So it's good to have some kinds of routines in place in the organization that can really save you from rushing when you're close to the deadline.
Yeah, because that's the thing. One thing is if you're coordinating, another thing is if you're an ordinary partner. But let's just say that you wrote the proposal, so you're the coordinator. So, so in this case, there's a lot of administrative compliance.
Yes.
And it's these things, they just explode if you don't deal with it properly from the beginning.
Yeah. Yes, fully.
And so what happened? You got the funding, Chiara, and then were you the one that was supposed to do this?
Yes, but it was always teamwork. So I was implementing the activities after winning the grant, but at the same time, I was really working in tandem with these volunteers. So I was mentioning that everyone had a task. Let's say there was someone who was mainly dealing with the communication, another person dealing with the outreach and events, another person dealing with advocacy. So I perfectly knew who to turn to and who to work with when I had to implement one specific activity as part of our work packages.
Because you're super reliant on these people now, right? You become reliant on volunteers like this. Yeah.
I have to say they were working a lot. Yes.
Because then that one thing is that when it starts, and you need to get these things in place, but then it's been running for a while. Then comes reporting.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you? Because you haven't done this before. So did your manager have some ways of doing things in the organization of standards, and was that already in place?
You mean about implementing activities?
Yeah, documentation. And so for the reports you have to give, you have some things that you need to keep to file, so to say, yeah? So you can gather things when you need to report. So was there already a system in place?
Yeah, yes, I would say there was a very good system. First of all, it might sound a bit simple, but also in order to coordinate all the activities that we would have had as a consequence of winning the grant and all the other activities that we were implementing internally, we had a very huge calendar in the office.
Yeah.
Where we were writing down and color coding the different activities, so we knew if they were part of the grant, if we had to deliver them by a set deadline according to the Erasmus Plus deadlines and so on. But also another good tool that we had in place was a very simple Excel sheet, and that took track of each work package activity. But it was indeed very basic because it just had the activity name, the short description connected to that activity, and any metrics that we had committed to in the grant application stage. For example, let's say we need to implement a webinar. So we write the name of the webinar, description, topic, if we have one already, then the implementation date, and as a metrics, the number of attendees that we want to reach. So after the activity took place, I would update the Excel directly with the actual date and any comments that were describing all the deviations that we had, if any. Indeed, it was a simple file, and it took maybe 5 to 10 minutes for me to complete it and report deviations after the activity had happened. But it was really saving me from rushing close to the deadline, or something that also can happen to this kind of organizations. Let's say you implement a webinar or an event or another type of activity early in the year, but then you approach December with the final reporting of your Erasmus grant, and you don't remember anymore how many attendees you had, what went wrong, and why. So It's something really simple. It's a very simple tool, but it really helps a lot. And it also helps in case there are staff changes in the organization. For example, when the person who kept institutional memory in the organization leaves, then thanks to this type of tool, the person coming knows where to retrieve the information they need to complete the reporting at a later stage.
I'm the opposite of this. So I would be the one that has to sit 1 year after start and gather information for a deadline tomorrow, 6:00. I don't have this structural gene in me. It's as much as I want to, as much as I try to throughout my career, because it's exactly what you need to do in a small organization. You need a person with a talent for structure to do this, because reporting, I've seen even in P&O where I worked, reporting's being delayed by 6 months because of people with my way of doing things being totally overwhelmed by work and having to ask for officially asking the project officer to move it because they are not made. No, these kind of things. It's well done, and that's a good tip for you out there, anyways, right? To anything. Make a list, an Excel sheet of the deliverables you have and what you have to document in the reporting. And then every time there's something, fill it in. You can make your own sheet. You can do it however you want, but as long as you document it. Yeah. And ask the project officer. Did you use your project officer throughout the implementation?
I use my project officer on the volunteers side. Yes, I did.
Yeah, so you asked the commission representative about different things throughout the process.
Sorry, you mean the project officer on the commission side?
Yeah.
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. With a couple of questions, and I remember during one of the info sessions, I could also meet them in person, and that was useful. Yes.
And normally, my own experience is that, and that's in general, the commission representatives are helpful. I've only once or twice run into a stiff one or a pointy one. One was a little bit difficult to work with, but in general, throughout all the years I've been working with this, very down to earth. Even if you're junior and have to, they want to help. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Funding structures to create cash flow. Was that something in the organization? Did you have it sort of a strategy to have a flow of projects so you could to support your work?
Yes, we were doing that because, of course, it's hard to survive and only rely on Erasmus Plus funding. Because, of course, you never know how it goes. You're never sure about being successful. And also we know that with this type of grants, then you get pre-financing at the beginning, but then you have to wait until you send in the final report to have the last payment. So we were trying to balance that during the year, also with other types of projects that we were organizing, mainly with our partners, which was very, very, very important. Also because there were really synergies between what we were implementing as part of our grant and what we were implementing together with them.
Yeah.
So we had a very clear mission, so everything fitted into that mission, and this way we could also balance cash flow a bit more.
Yeah, but where did your so besides from projects, where did your what would you have founded on financially? The foundation of the organization financially.
We were also funded by, as the organization is a membership-based organization, on the membership fees of our members, and then by partners as well, and indeed projects we were organizing together.
Yeah, it's very typical. Finally, because not everything runs from point A to point Z as it is planned, right? So unexpected challenges and changes in the project. Did you experience that, where you had to that put you under pressure with
Yes, definitely. Maybe I will also touch upon something we've said before, also in terms of volunteers or the turnover, either when it comes to volunteers, but also when it comes to the secretariat. Then it's really hard sometimes to deliver exactly how you wanted the full work program, because sometimes you have these kind of disruptions that build up and bring a lot of pressure as well, especially when you're approaching deadlines. And in case of one of beneficiary grants like the ones we were having, there's no partner you can share the load with. Everything falls on the team.
Yep.
And also minor changes can become a stress point in that case. So that's why I think it's important to, as I was saying before, being very structured, always reporting what's not going well, trying to anticipate the challenges and being flexible as much as possible so that the team can really absorb these unexpected surprises without entirely derailing the project.
It definitely, this thing with, so you have internal changes and external changes, right? So internal change, naturally, the biggest one is staff change. People find a new job, and you're only two people. Or the main, that is of course a huge stone on the road that can tip the wagon into the ditch, or disrupt a lot. Yeah. Because it's not just the working force; it's also the relationship to the partners and so on and so forth. It's many things there. That's that, and then you have external changes that you have to handle. So there might be partners that jump out. There might come financial issues or whatever from other partners. Something that is really setting the project under pressure, where you as a small organization have to handle these things. I guess rely a lot on the project officer.
Yeah, in that case, yes. But I would also mention as an external unexpected surprise also, for example, when you have to organize an activity or an event and simply someone cancels last minute, or you organize a type of activity and you don't reach the number of participants you expected and that you had applied to in the grant. So of course it's numbers that you will later have to change because you were not able to match the expectations.
Change or justify, right?
Yeah. Yes.
One way or the other. It's so that in this respect, things goes in ring, right? If you don't have much experience when you write the proposals and you put some figures for, because often figures for workshops or something like this, or webinars, you put them in like 2 days before you submit, right? What's this? What should we put? And you quickly put them. What can it be? It can be like this, and you think it sounds reasonable when you do it. But then when you start to carry out the activities, it's not going to happen. It's no. Which actually is a nice bridge to the human impact section here, because when you don't meet when you start to run into these kind of challenges as an employee in these small organizations, stress and anxiety and a weary mind starts to set in, right?
Yes.
This is, as my regular listeners know, this is something that I care a lot about. As an individual, as a professional, I've been myself having a burnout. I've been under some very rough conditions that had a huge impact on myself. And therefore it's important for me to share and open up about this side effect, uncomfortable side effect from this sector. So, have you been through something like this?
Yeah, I also think that it's a very important and delicate topic. Sometimes it's also underestimated that both emotional and physical load can slowly build up. often without you even noticing, until you really realize how much you've been juggling different tasks. And it's usually a lot, as we said, during project writing stage, but also during the project delivery. Everything is happening at the same time. And in a small organization with no big team, there's no real moment where you hand things over and breathe a little. So I would say that emotionally, also in this case, the stakes feel very human, because when something goes wrong, you're not disappointing a faceless department of a big organization when you and your colleagues are just a number, but you are disappointing real people that you care about, like the team members, the volunteers that we were mentioning, but also the young participants that are involved and engaged in all the activities that you propose. And that emotional weight exists because you are invested. It also exists on their side because they are invested and want to be part of what you create. But honestly, that's also what makes the work so meaningful in this type of sector. On the other side, physically, I think the load comes also from the fact that the projects have very intense pace. It's important to mention the load that these activities may create, as we said, emotional side, physical side, but it's also important to remember what keeps you going, like the smiles of the participants at the end of an activity, or the messages you receive days later saying that the project they attended changed something for them, and also the feeling that you are part of something bigger than your workload. And of course it's demanding, but it's really, really rewarding as well.
You have this two sides of the same coin, right? So you have it emotionally and psychologically, it's demanding, but especially in this sector, it's driven by a lot of passion in the Erasmus Plus corner, because it's NGOs and many NGOs. It's really, there is a lot of passion. I can see it with the Erasmus Plus people, guests I've been having through here. They are extraordinary people. Really, it's not because the Horizon people are not extraordinary as well, but they often come from organizations where there's much more financial capacity for salaries and for, there's not the same danger of being fired because you don't get things in and so on and so forth. So that is indeed the two sides of the same coin. And then you mention, yes, that's with the deadlines, because the Commission seems totally incapable of not putting deadlines right after public holidays. So this is I have more time now myself because I have been laid off. So now it's my job now to do this podcast, and I actually think I will try to do something about this to make a campaign for changing the dates, because but it's the amount of stress and burnouts and psychological toll it has on people, mental toll it has throughout the continent, thousands and thousands of people, because deadlines are in February. So Christmas is gone. Right after Easter, in April. In September, right after summer holiday. People sit and do this. So it's like the Commission, it's almost like taking advantage of people's, how much they burn for these things, how much heart they have in this, but we're always going to get the proposals in anyways. It destroys people. It does destroy. Yes, it does destroy some people. Some people have to leave this and do something else because this is too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, did you manage to slip away from the burnout, or did you have to take a break?
I managed. It's also a very delicate topic, and I think it can originate by through what you were mentioning with minding the deadlines, but also these cycles that keep going on of doing too much with few resources for too long. And then there's a point where you feel like you never manage to fully rest, but it's just ongoing work and you cannot take a break. I've not been there, but I've been close to the moment where you feel like there's so much to do that at some point you realize that you're less creative or you're less patient, you're less energetic. And in my experience, so what I've tried to on myself is finding a balance between this passion people in this type of organizations have and boundaries. Because we're very mission driven, and that's also, of course, the beauty of the sector. But it's good to understand our own limits and put boundaries when needed. We were also saying that yes, there it can happen that you stay late because you really want the activity to be perfect, or you answer emails at night because you don't want your partners or either the participant to keep waiting for an answer, or you take on too many tasks because you don't want to say no. And in the beginning, it's very energizing, but slowly you start operating on passion rather than on capacity. And this can affect what we were saying, creativity, having less space for ideas, but also coming back to what we were mentioning about the emotion and the physical toll of this type of activities. So in this case, what worked on me was putting these boundaries that can also be something very simple that takes a lot of discipline to build. But like, for example, deciding that after a certain hour or just simply after working hours, you really don't check your emails anymore, and you remove notification, or taking a real day off after a training or an event that you've organized abroad during the weekend. So I think that cultivating this kind of discipline for ourselves, but also building this type of culture in organization, and in this case, small organizations, is a way to make the work more sustainable and keeps also this passion and motivation alive.
Yeah. I think it's often come down to the manager's view on these things. Now, Brussels is a hard-working city. Brussels ecosystem is a place where, first of all, Belgian working hours is standard 40 hours per week, and you pay your lunch yourself, which is very, very different from where I come from, where you have 37 hours and the employer pays the lunch. So already there, you can do the math that you tip in 9 o'clock in Brussels and you leave at 6 for a normal working day. And Denmark, you start at 9 and you can leave at 4.
Wow.
Yeah. It is a massive difference because I came from it. I came from Danish working hours and then I moved to Brussels working hours the last year. And this is just the standard. That's just like it is. But that's a standard hour. And then people in small organizations, I was working for a 50 person organization. If you work for a 3-person or 2-person organization, you don't count the hours anymore, especially when it's about proposals and projects. And if you don't have a manager that hails the long working hours, and that you don't have to, that is looking angry at you if you leave, well, there's no flexibility. Up against the manager that say, look, understands the intensity, understands that you need to take care of the few resources that he or her has under them. That makes the world of a difference, because then, if you have that understanding, then there's something to work with. There's an understanding. There's a human understanding of what it is to do this. If you're in the other corner, find a new work. I would say that to try to do something else, because it's never going to change in that organization anyways. Then you are always going to be busy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's important to have, as you said, the manager who who understand, and I think it's easy to find this type of managers in small organizations, because as we were saying, everyone is juggling more or less the same tasks. It's important to make a clear division, but also at the same time, for example, when I was working in the previous organization, I was working on the ground, but also my manager was working on the ground. So we both had the same understanding what it meant to spend many hours on that. So,
Yeah.
well, we were all putting our own boundaries, because it's also important to understand what works for you as a person. But of course, it's of course helpful when the other person, your manager, keeps this flexibility in the team.
Here towards the end, advice. Do you have anything you want to share with people in the same corner?
Of course, keeping your team and yourself functional, as we've just said, building boundaries with discipline. Other than that, I think it's important to, and also very, very useful to exchange best practices with other youth organizations to understand who does what and how, to improve internal processes as well, and indeed have also this vision of what people around you are doing in your same type of environment. Another advice would be that although everyone is trying to do everything, it's important to try to divide and structure roles clearly, so that you don't just have the team floating around because it's small, but having roles assigned can also help and structure the work as much as possible. And maybe, as I was saying before, again, having and creating these tracking tools, like making comments or activities right after that these activities happen, so that you know what to write at the reporting stage and you're covered in case someone drops out. So I would say these are the main reflections also from the entire conversation we've had so far.
Take it out there, dot them down, take advantage of this from Chiara's experience here. The grand final section, toughest challenge. So I always have the final segment. Handling EU funding in small organizations. Well, we've been talking about nothing but challenges here, right?
Exactly.
It's been a challenge episode talking about challenges. What have you dotted down?
Toughest challenge. That's also a tough question, because yes, we've, as you said, we've talked about challenges in this episode, but also I have to say we've mentioned some good sides of the work in youth organizations. But if I only had to name one, then I would mention the one that encompasses many others, which is wearing multiple hats at the same time. I think this is really one of the toughest for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's because in such small teams, you are sometimes at the same time the project designer. You can be the grant writer, you can be the accountant, you can be the logistics coordinator, the photographer, or even the social media manager all at once. And in bigger teams, of course, you have these functions split across teams, but in this case, everything falls on one or two people. But as I was also trying to do before, I also like pointing out to the other side of the coin. And I think that because you are handling everything in a small team, then you really get to see the project in its entirety. So you understand the work and what it takes to complete the work from the beginning until the end. You know that every decision that you make will really have an impact. And this whole all of these choices and all of these experience that you build through the years also help a lot in a future career, future work experiences, because in this context, I think you really learn to think strategically, You learn to innovate on the spot, to anticipate challenges, to adapt very quickly when something unexpected happens, as we said before, either internally or externally. And I also find this type of work quite empowering because you know that you can shape the outcomes, you know you can innovate, you know you can adapt. So the responsibility is intense. There's a lot at stake, but the successes feel very big and very rewarding. So undoubtedly, it's challenging to wear multiple hats in these situations. It can be exhausting if one doesn't pay attention. It requires discipline. It requires structure and planning and a lot of energy. But it also gives youth organization a very unique perspective and a very direct impact on people they work with. So I think that's also what makes the sector so special.
You managed to dot down something that ended on a high note instead of the. That's cool.
Yes, I like ending on a high note.
Well done, Chiara. Thank you so much. Now I am just going to land this plane before we say goodbye to dear listeners. So, dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the end. I hope, and this is especially for an episode like this, I truly hope that it reaches to many of you sitting there in 2-3 person organizations throughout Europe and has to deal with exactly these challenges. I truly hope that. So thanks for that, for listening, and I really hope you can use this. Now, if you like what you've been hearing here, there's a lot of content on my website, thegrant.eu. It's a platform more than a landing page. Go in there and go to Podcast Universe and you'll find tons of content. I have more than 200 episodes now. Not everything on Erasmus, naturally, and not everything on how to prepare a proposal, but there are lots of proposal episodes there. So go in there, browse around, and check it out, and find the content that suits you. And while you're at that, if you want to support me, say, wow, this is fantastic what this guy's built up, you can do that by, you go to the bottom of every single site. I have an online form that you can fill in to connect to my, to subscribe to my email list. Yeah. And finally, connect with me on LinkedIn and connect with the project on LinkedIn, The Grant. Search for that and search for Niels Tudor Winther. That's where the fun happens. That's where the flow is. That's where I pick up guests. That's where I like stuff there. That's where my whole marketing is with episodes. So, yeah. That's that. Chiara, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Now, I don't know when there's going to be a new meetup because since I've been laid off, I'm not going regular to Brussels anymore. But because the way of working here with my company is naturally that I will connect the podcast to EU projects. So time and again, in the future, I will, of course, go to Brussels because that's often where there are events in connection with projects. So I hope so. I will be connected to projects. Oh, that's also stress. One-man band, Chiara. No. Chiara, thank you so much. Let's say goodbye to the dear listeners. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Grant. All the Grant episodes have their own site on the Grant website. You will find the link to the episode site where you listen to your podcast. On the site for this episode, you'll find a link to Chiara's personal LinkedIn site. Further, there are links to the timeline series and the implementation series from this podcast, which should be helpful for many of you. Next week, I have a very interesting episode coming up for all out there dealing with Erasmus+. The episode is on micro-credentials, what it is, how to add it to the proposal, and how to work with it during the project implementation. You can indeed look forward to that.